Has any Redditor been kidnapped? If yes, what is your story? I was kidnapped when I was younger, but I didn't realize it at the time. My uncle and my aunt were going through a divorce, and he was staying at our house with my cousin. One day he said we were going on a trip. I was young, and I loved going on trips, so I didn't think anything of it. He took us from Connecticut to Minnesota, and we stayed there for a few days. What I didn't know was he was about to lose custody of my cousin, so he took us and ran. I think he also took me just because I was there and he didn't want to leave me home alone. He was arrested shortly afterwards and sadly he killed himself in jail. How old were you? Was he a nice uncle? I was 8 or 9 at the time. He was a great uncle. He was an outdoors kind of guy, so we would all go on hikes and go fishing or things like that. He never did anything in front of me to think he was a bad guy, but I did find out later on that he had issues with hard drugs and alcohol. My old teammate got kinda kidnapped. Nicest guy you'll ever meet. Told me a story about when he got kidnapped. Mind you, he was a 190 pounds college athlete at the time. Essentially he got carjacked and shoved in his own trunk. But the perpetrators just wanted to use his car for a joyride. So after a night of speeding, smoking blunts in his car, and doing whatever else, they got pulled over by the police. He said the looks on the cops were something else, thinking they were coming up on a routine traffic stop only to find the driver was in the trunk of the car. I lived in Cambodia. I was at the local market with my then 2-year-old daughter. I turn around and she was gone. I was in a complete panic, rushing around searching for her. I had to pay the local police $200 to do their job. That's how it was back then. My daughter turned up at the border. The person who took her was trying to take her out of the country. The only reason she was noticed was because she had a distinctive yellow t-shirt on. This was 13 years ago. She wasn't traumatized by the event. Thankfully, she was too young to remember. The man who took her got sent to prison for 15 years. That's the last we heard of him. I was almost kidnapped once. I was visiting the mall with some others and left alone to go to the bathroom, which was down a long isolated hallway. When I came out of the women's bathroom, a dirty old man rushed out of the men's and pinned me up against the wall. There was an emergency exit at the end of the hallway, and he was dragging me toward it when another dude came out of the bathroom. He was big and bald and looked like a biker, complete with vest. He yelled, "Hey!" And the old man dropped me and ran. I was 15 at the time. When I was like 10, a friend's mother abandoned me in another state while she kidnapped her own children. I was spending the weekend at a friend's house. The friend's mother had a manic episode and decided to leave her husband and move in with her recently deceased sister's widower. He lived in Vermont, we lived in Georgia. She packed us into the minivan at 5 a.m. and took off. Her 2 oldest children, 13 and 15, got pretty upset, so she left the 3 of us with an aunt in Pennsylvania. It was pretty terrifying for my parents. As a baby I was kidnapped in Greece. Back in the late 80s my parents were sitting down for dinner at a restaurant with a glass front. My dad was trying to calm me down outside and dinner arrived. Old Greek lady was like, "Hey, I can look after him, I'm not going anywhere." My dad figured the table was literally the other side of a glass pane. "Okay, thanks." Dad walks in, Mom asks where I am, he turns to point and she'd gone. My dad goes one way, his mate goes the other. The mate caught her going into a house to show her friends. Freshman year of college, I was struggling to send money home and in desperation, became a sugar baby per se. The psychiatrist I was with this one night said we were going to his home that was close by. He was a fan of smoking weed, and so through the haze I realized we were driving away from my city, and in my panic I asked why we were going so far. He didn't answer, and for a solid 5 minutes he ignored me and drove fast further away. It was the middle of the night and I just had my phone on me. As we were pulling into a very dark forest area I told him my friend has my location and that as he didn't drive me back she would call the police. I was stoned and scared and had to do everything to not show weakness to this man. I got home safely and threw up. When I was 5, I was in a grocery store with my mother. She was looking at something and I was right behind her when a man picked me up and started walking out of the store. He got to the door where a clerk stopped him and asked if I was his child. He set me down and ran out of the store. The clerk quietly walked me back to my mom when she turned around and asked me where I had wandered off. The clerk never said anything and I never told my mom until years later as an adult. As I write this, I can still feel the confusion in mind of what was going on and processing why this strange man had picked me up. I can still see the haunted look of desperation and lust in his eyes. I didn't know what I was seeing at the time, but I've come to realize that had the clerk not acted, I would be dead or worse. When I was like 5, I was playing in front of my grandma's house. I guess a man just scooped me up and put me on his back and started running. My grandma somehow quickly realized what's happening and all the kids started screaming. So she started the run after him, and as he was getting further, every woman from each house comes out with their flip-flop in their hands. The guy gets scared and drops me off and runs off. Now I didn't understand what was happening. I just have the memory of being on someone's back and that person running. I remember all the women one by one coming out. Imagine tightly put small row houses, including my grandma. My friend was almost kidnapped once. She had found some people online she wanted to meet. After much debate, I agreed to go with her to meet them in a park. Since I had a bad feeling, I brought my dog with me just as a little security measure. They gave my friend alcohol but didn't drink themselves. After hanging out with them for a while, I decided it was time to go. We started walking towards one way and they walked towards the opposite way to their friend who had came in a van to pick them up. They called out for my friend to come and meet their friend. Drunk and stupid as she was, she hurries over there and the driver grabs her arm and tries to pull her into the car. She is resisting, so he dropped his grip on her and she falls back on the ground. It happened very fast and I was far away from them. So I took off the leash from my dog and took hold on the collar and got him all excited. My dog is growling and pulling against them by now, and I scream that I will send the dog on them if they don't stop. They open the back of the van and try to grab her again. Then I let my dog loose. My scary-looking dog ran growling at full speed against them, and then they let her go and jumped in the car and drove away. She was lucky that I brought my kind of unstable dog that day.